So, welcome everyone to the webinar, The Role on Technical Assistance in Turning Around Rural Schools Landscapes for ESSA and Implementation. My name is Julie Duffield, and I'm here at the Center for School Turnaround and sponsoring this webinar with REL Northwest as part of the School Turnaround Learning Community offerings to all of you to have conversations on this important topic. If you just arrived, I'd like to review housekeeping for you. So please remain on mute. I'll just ask our presenters to unmute their own lines, but have participants remain on mute. We'd also invite you at any time to talk by your fingers into the chat. We really want this to be a reflective time where we learn with and from one another around the information and the concepts being shared and the research that's going to be shared out. Quick polls. We've already practiced. If you have sound, let me know by hitting the quick poll green check. And if you're having difficulty getting on, Plan B, follow along a teleconference call we sent that you're on, and eventhelp@wested.org, and we can help you that way too. As we underscored, this is a time to get to share with and learn from one another. We've done introductions with our states, so welcome everyone, and welcome again from the folks from all the way over here in Puerto Rico. We have folks, as you can see on the map, from all over. Really excited that you could be with us. So as we go through this, please type, if you haven't already done, an introduction to the chat. We'll have the chat open to go to all participants unless you have a technical question, and you can go to the tab and hit the host, and we can give you private offline support. One of the burning questions we'd like to know from you today as we sort of start our introductions on who's on presenting with us and share a little bit about ourselves is, what is one burning question you have about today's topic? If you haven't already shared that, please do, or reflect it in the chat. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Julie Duffield, and I work here. I'm a co-facilitator for the School Turnaround Learning Community and the Network of School Improvement Network leads. And I come and was brought up in a very remote island between Australia and Papua New Guinea, and I spent a lot of my professional life working in isolated communities and school turnaround. So this topic is really close to me and close to home. And my great pleasure is to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Catlin Scott. I've had the honor of working with Catlin as she's the evaluator for the Center for School Turnaround, and I really appreciate all the extensive experience that she brings to this conversation as she leads us through research and evaluation on this important topic. Catlin has been interested in education such as social justice issues, and her research has been focused on research that will improve K-12 education for traditionally unserved students. She works at Education Northwest as a practice expert, and she is a principal investigator for a portfolio of multi-year projects and with lots of different research focuses, and that includes, as I said, the evaluation of the center, the evaluation of Wyoming State's system of support, and many other projects around the implementation of school improvement grants in rural areas across the nation. So, Catlin, without further ado, it's over to you.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Julie. As Julie said, I'm here to tell you about a study that I did for REL Northwest. It's a survey of principals in rural schools that implemented the transformation model using federal school improvement grants. This is a quantitative study predominantly. I have a set of panelists here who will add some interesting information from the field, adding details that I'm hoping makes my study come alive for you listening today. We'll have three people. First, Brad Billings from the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development, Deb Pfost from Idaho Building Capacity, and Dan McGee, Superintendent of Pryor School District 2 and 3. After I tell you a little bit about the study, they will chime in with some examples from their experiences in the field. So our agenda today has three parts: In the first section, I'll talk about lessons for ESSA, or the Every Student Succeeds Act, from Rural School Improvement Grants. In the second section, we'll talk about how technical assistance can help rural schools implement evidence-based strategies. That's the big takeaway from this talk. And then in the third section, our panelists will share some successful examples of SIG technical assistance. So, to begin, lessons for ESSA from Rural School Improvement Grants. As you may know, school improvement grants required actions that rural schools often found difficult to implement due to their remote locations. Also, ESSA continues to require that states and districts provide evidence-based technical assistance for school improvement in rural areas. So despite these difficulties, we're going to continue to be working with rural schools to help improve, and ultimately, I believe that the efforts under school improvement grants can help inform this work for the future in rural schools. I want to share some background with you about school improvement grants. Some of you may know this, but I think it provides some important context. First of all, in the study I'm talking about, I surveyed principals in Cohort 1 schools, and Cohort 1 began in 2010. Schools in Cohort 1 had 3-year federal grants, and some could roll over funds into the next year as well. These grants were fairly substantial for each school, about $1 million per year per school. And as I said before, it's important to remember that ESSA continues to fund school improvement throughout the nation and in rural areas. However, there's going to be more flexibility in the future. I also wanted to tell you about the federal SIG model. And as I talk about this, if you can use your poll, answer the question, are you familiar with these SIG models? I'm interested in seeing how the audience has been informed about school improvement grants. So the transformation model is the one I'll be talking about today. In this model, you replace the principal and also do a number of things to improve the school. These things really can be thought of in 3 categories: improving the staff, implementing research-based instructional practices, and involving family and community. The other types of models were the turnaround model, the restart model, and the closure models. These were not as popular in rural areas. And in fact, most rural schools use the transformation model. Thanks for participating in the poll. I'm seeing that most people are familiar with these models. That's great. Many things in this model, the transformation model, can be used in the future under ESSA, especially evidence-based practices. So in the Northwest, we had about 23 of the 49 schools that were in rural areas and got school improvement grants use the transformation model. Now, this is a pretty high percentage, but the number 23 was too small for a survey. So we actually surveyed principals across the nation, and 135 responded to the survey, providing information about implementation of their SIG transformation model in a rural area. Here are my research questions. The first question is about implementation. The second question really asked about challenges. What were the challenges to implementing the SIG transformation model? Third, I asked principals about the technical assistance they received for implementation. And then I did an analysis that related information about technical assistance to implementation. Now, I also wanted to give you this more detailed look at the survey content. As I said before, in the transformation model, there are really three categories of strategies. I saw these three categories as first, improving instruction, second, ensuring high-quality staff, and third, engaging family and community. In the right-hand column, you can see the types of things that the survey asked about in each of the categories. To rate implementation, I asked principals to use a scale that I adapted from Dean Fixon's work. Dean is actually one of the partners on the Federal Center on School Turnaround, so he's very well versed in school turnaround as well as implementation. On this scale, people were asked if they had implemented the strategies in their school that are part of this transformation model. They could answer NA, not applicable. This might mean that they weren't implementing the strategy or had decided not to. They could answer planning or developing. This meant that they were still in the development stages of the process. They could answer partially implementing, which meant that the strategy was in place, but in the beginning stages. Or they could answer fully implementing, which meant that the strategy was fully in place and a regular part of the routine of the school. Now, the survey took place at the end of the grant. One might expect that everything would be fully implemented. However, some things may have taken longer than the grant period, the 3-year period, to fully implement. And also, some strategies may have started with one process and then switched mid-year to a different type of strategy and might have gone back to the planning or partially implementing stage. So I want to tell you about the results of this survey.
We found that overall, few rural schools said they were able to really fully implement the school improvement grant transformation model. Just 5% implemented all the strategies that the survey asked about, the list that I showed you on the previous slide, and another 32% had partially implemented these strategies. We also asked which strategies were challenging. And as you can see here, larger percentages of principals said schools fully implemented strategies for improving instruction. So these are the strategies that are able to be implemented right in the classroom. Using data for instruction, you see more than 3/4 implemented that strategy fully, and more than 2/3 implemented operational flexibility for the principal, which allowed the principal to change things like the schedule in the school. So those strategies about implementing instruction and improving these instruction were the ones that were most frequently fully implemented. The converse of this is the strategies that were challenging. You can see here that improving instruction was challenging for a smaller percentage of these principals. However, ensuring high-quality staff was challenging for more, as was engaging family and community. Let's do a very quick poll and ask, do these results surprise you? And as I do that, I wanted to see if any of our panelists had a story or a comment to talk about in terms of challenges or anything that had happened thus far that I've talked about.
This is Dan. I can
jump in, Dan, and I just want to let you, Catlin, that of the folks on the call, 9 have said no, they don't surprise. 3 people have said yes, those results do surprise. So let's go back and just finish that poll. So, folks, we're asking you, do these results surprise you? If you haven't let us know in the bottom right-hand side, really want to hear your voice and let us know if these. Dan says no, they don't. Brad says no, they don't. We're getting a lot of little red crosses up here. For those on your phone, thank you. Christine says no. Colleen, Connie, Deborah. One person was surprised by them, so thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going through the names here. So lots of people who did the poll, Catlin, I would say 22 and over has said not surprised, and 1 has said yes. So thanks, everyone, for doing that poll. Really want to make sure your voice is in the conversation, and Dan, back to you.
Okay, I would just like to say, would you mind putting that slide back up that we just had? If you look at the improving instruction, and I guess we found in our school that that was the easiest portion of it, because that is something that the principal and myself as superintendent, we can directly control. As you get further down on that slide, staff removal, family engagement, community engagement, those are very difficult for us in our small community. One is, trying to remove staff, especially tenured teaching staff, very difficult to do. We had several grievances against us. We had, as we would try to implement the evaluation model, the SOPAS evaluation model, even though the union agreed to that initially, when you actually went through the implementation and they found areas of improvement, several staff members were not pleased with that, including the union president. And then as you go down to family and community engagement, we tried a lot of different models. We had picnics, we provided food, we provided entertainment, and it was still exceptionally difficult to bring the community into the school.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan. And I think that Dan's experiences really add light to these findings. There have been a few other research studies that have shown that family and community engagement and ensuring high-quality staff is more difficult in rural areas. I'd also like to invite people at this point to type into chat with how these challenges resonate with your experiences as well. And I see that Natalie has responded that although not in a rural school, these challenges resonate in that community as in other communities as well. And I think this is also really true from the research that I have seen about school improvement grants. These are issues that are really quite difficult. In rural schools, I think they also have challenges because of being in a remote location. So in addition to simply the typical challenge of finding and ensuring high-quality staff, it's also sometimes difficult to be in a rural area that is far from a university that is training teachers. It's sometimes difficult to be in a rural community that doesn't have as many businesses or as many organizations as a town or a suburb or an urban area would have. So thank you for sharing that in chat as well.
And there was just one more strategy that Kimberly just posted saying we have high levels of staff engagement in rural schools in the Ohio Application Collaborative, but due to having multiple job parents have a hard time in being involved in schools.
Right. Right, and I think that's a really good point. Multiple jobs, and also the school may be fairly far for the parent. It's maybe a long drive. So some strategies of other types of engagement may be important as well. Well, thanks, everyone. Julie, shall I move on? I'm thinking...
Definitely. I just think in light of time, we definitely should keep moving, and I really appreciate everyone sharing your own experiences in the chat as we do that. So thank you. Keep them coming. So back over to you, and we'll keep moving. I think we're about 5 to 6 minutes behind, just FYI.
Okay, great. And as people type into chat, know that I'm going to be reading this carefully later. I'm going to continue doing research in rural areas, and I hope to get some great ideas from you. And probably many of you will enjoy hearing those ideas as well. So my next section is about how technical assistance can help rural schools implement evidence-based strategies. And this is really the finding in the study I was most excited about. Under SIG, the more strategies for which rural principals reported receiving technical assistance, the more strategies they reported their schools fully implemented. This was statistically significant, which means it's likely a meaningful association rather than something that occurred by chance. So as you see here, when schools had 8 to 12 strategies that they received technical assistance for, they implemented 7.2 of the strategies on average. So they were able to implement more strategies than those who had less technical assistance. Okay. I also wanted to share this with you. We looked at the 12 strategies, each one individually, and this is a list of the ones where when technical assistance was reported, the strategy was more likely to be fully implemented. And there's one on this list that I really want to call attention to, and that is implementing new research-based curricula. So under the Every Student Succeeds Act, rural and other schools that are in need of improvement will need to implement evidence-based practices under ESSA, and states will be able to support with some finance from the federal government these evidence-based practices. So this is something where technical assistance in the past was really associated with being able to fully implement these new research-based curricula. I think that's going to be something important to think about in the future as schools try improvement strategies using evidence-based practices. Now I want to tell you a little bit about what kinds of entities are providing technical assistance. 91% of those in our study were receiving technical assistance from their district. And one of our panelists is a district person, so he is well aware of this type of technical assistance. The second largest percentage, 70%, received technical assistance from their state. And we also have a panelist who is from a state, the state of Alaska. Then 19% received assistance from the university. And one of our presenters, Deb Pfost, is actually associated with a university in Idaho. So we have these types represented. You'll see here that other was also a fairly large percentage, and these were other types of nonprofits or for-profits that provided technical assistance. So these are the types of entities that are providing this technical assistance. This brings me to a transition for our third section, successful examples of SIG technical assistance from the field. And we'll be hearing from our presenters in this order. First, Brad, then Dan, and then Deb. And as I said before, my quantitative study really needs to be brought to life by some of these examples of what worked under SIG, and we can be thinking as people talk about how this might apply to the future under ESSA. So I am going to invite Brad to tell us about Alaska.
Perfect. Thank you, Catlin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Brad Billings. I currently work as the administrator of the Career and Technical Ed program here at the department. I just transitioned recently. My love and where I cut my teeth is with school improvement, Title I, and honestly being a classroom teacher. So representing the state or talking from the state perspective, as Catlin just mentioned, is I think at the state, the thing we found that added the most value to these rural sites was providing a space for principals, for teachers, for folks to interact to throw their problems, their concerns, different training needs at each other. Often in these rural sites, it's very isolating, and so as a state, we've provided some conferences that happen every year where folks can come in and join with their peers from other schools and other districts. And then also we're working to integrate and to use technology to connect folks out in the geographically rural areas. So that's I think the biggest bang for the buck that we've found coming from the state level recently. And now I'm going to shift gears a bit and talk about what one of our districts and some independent consultant contractors were able to provide in the way of technical assistance. The district I'll use as an example is the Bering Strait School District. As the name indicates, they're located out in the Bering Strait, very, very close to Russia. There's 15 small, rural, fly-in only schools. From 2011 to 2015, 3 to 4 of those schools were SIG schools within that district. And just talking about what they did to succeed in delivering that technical assistance, the first was that they were able to go through and identify needs that were specific to their site and their district. And so as that slide indicates, that second bullet there, things that they chose to focus on was, first of all, implementing a rigorous teacher evaluation system, and that evolved through eye observation. There was a contractor, one of our regional service providers, who consulted with them from the outside to support that. Another area that they focused on then was RTI, implementing scheduling, interventions, the use of data around the area of reading, and that has since grown to include, of course, mathematics, science, behavior, other areas since then. They also were focused on implementing CHAMPS, a positive behavior support system. And then the thing that these 4 schools used to coordinate that was the IndaStar School Improvement Planning Model. In Alaska, it's Alaska STEP. And they use this as a way to engage and integrate the school staff, and then as much as possible the community and family. As indicated by Dan, that's something that we struggle with as well, is getting them involved. So then another thing that this district did very well, and here's where I think the district can play a role. The district, Bering Strait School District, insisted that the outside consultants and contractors who were delivering the technical assistance, that they were integrated with district initiatives. And so that included, first of all, getting them out to district training, making sure that those consultants were part of the larger district initiatives, but then also insisting that those consultants were coordinating with each other. And the Bering Strait School District organized monthly calls or quarterly calls where these consultants were talking in detail about what they were working on, such that the consultants weren't stepping on each other and were actually supportive and integrating, that I think led to more sustainability in the end. So that coordinating of contractors. The other thing that the district did well was allow these 4 schools to form a technical assistance pod of their own, if you will. And what that was these 4 schools working together to support each other. And then at the end of the SIG grant, it was interesting to watch the district then adopt many of these programs that had been effective and expand them to the rest of the district. And so that was something that they were very intentional about, using the SIG program as a way to pilot, if you will, some larger needs of the district. So that was a way that they were engaged. I think probably the gem that came out of this for the Bering Strait School District is, as part of their work in developing a teacher evaluation system, they were very deliberate about including some cultural standards. So Alaska, I think probably 20 years ago, developed some cultural standards, a set of standards talking about what a school system and what teachers should be doing to recognize and value the local culture. And these are strong standards that sometimes we didn't know how to integrate with the academic standards. And so one thing that Bering Strait School District did is they used some of those resources from the SIG grants to have that contractor integrate those standards directly into the iObservation tool and into their teacher evaluation system. And I put the link to that there in the bottom bullet if you want to just check what that's all about, and take a look at the Alaska Cultural Standards. They are a set of ideals that are continually pushing and reminding school staff to be reaching out into the community. As I mentioned before, we're often bringing in outside certified teachers to these rural sites, and so we're always needing to make an effort to integrate and to continually go back at that issue of engaging community and family. I'm going to pass it back to Catlin and see if there are any questions you have or clarifications you'd like from me.
Thanks, Brad. This is Julie. I just wanted to let you know we posted the link into the chat for folks about the your cultural sensitive evaluation systems and those standards for proficiencies. Let us know if folks on the call are using other pieces. Please share them, and we can create a list of these sorts of examples to follow up after the chat. And Brad, could you jump into the chat? People would like to know what district you were talking about. And maybe you could type the details in the chat about some specifics on that. I think we have a link about this also in the follow-up resources. Is that right, Brad?
Well, I don't think so. We do have that link that I've just included at the bottom of the slide.
Okay, we'll add that. So, Brad, what school again? Could you just type that in?
That's the Bering Strait School District. 15 small sites, about probably communities of 500 to 1,000 people. I think probably 4 or 5 of these sites can actually see Russia from their backyard on a clear day.
Thank you, Brad. Kathleen, over to you for any questions that come up in the chat. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. And I do encourage you to look up those culturally sensitive teacher evaluation system standards that Brad posted about. I think that is a really promising thing from Alaska. So thanks again, Brad. I want to move to our next panelist, Dan McGee, who will tell you a bit about Montana, and he is the superintendent of a district there. Dan, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Yeah, Dan McGee from Pryor School District. It is on the Crow Reservation. It's a small K-12 school, 100 students on average, typically about 50 in the elementary, 50 in the high school. So we were one of 3 schools in the state that received the grant, and the only one that was K-12. We were the poorest performing school in the state at the time the grant was awarded in 2010. The technical assistance was kind of a neat model in that it was provided. Let's see, we had an instructional leader, a transformational leader, school board coach, and financial assistant, as well as an outside evaluator. These were all paid by the state, by Montana, but they were provided in district. And so the instructional leader and the transformational leader were here every single day. And so as far as the community and the students felt, they were employed by the school district. And I think that makes a difference, because then it's not some directive coming from the state directly. It is coming through these people that have built relationships among the staff and the community themselves. I would say the greatest impact from all of the experience of the people that came in from the state was the implementation of SOPAS, the model for staff evaluation, which incidentally was modified, was it last year, 2 years ago, to the EPAS system that the entire state now uses. It's voluntary for school districts, but many of the same evaluation tools, evaluation methods that were in SOPAS are now part of the EPAS that all districts use. And I guess the thing was, here in Pryor, the teaching staff hadn't been evaluated regularly for many, many years. If you went through personnel files 20 years ago, some of them may have been evaluated at that time. Most of them had not. And certainly within the last 7 or 8 years, there was no substantial evaluations at all. So there was really no way to measure how effective one teacher's teaching method was. And so just putting emphasis on the evaluation system and the teachers, for those of you that are not familiar with SOPAS, a lot of it is generated by the teacher initially. There's a series of questions and an interview that takes place before then, and then immediately after the lesson. It really forces them to reflect on their teaching. And that method we actually still use the SOPAS method as we perform our evaluations now. And I think that staff finally appreciates how informative those evaluations are. And there's always areas to improve, and now they realize that, even though maybe the reading scores, I'm an English teacher, maybe my reading scores are still going up, and they're going up at a rate higher than the state, but there's still an area that I can focus on, and the teachers allow the evaluator to spend time on that particular area. So that's been very well received by our staff now, although it was a little bit of a challenge initially. One other area that I'd like to talk about that may or may not affect the other 6 schools, but we had a very large financial problem in the district. When I started as superintendent, we were a little over $750,000 in the red coming out of the following year's budget. And so we had to do a layoff. We had 40 staff members. When I came for a school of 100 kids, we ended up having to lay off 13 positions in order to balance our budget. But, when we kind of talked about this earlier and with my board when I first came on, with 40 staff members, you're roughly at 1 staff member for every 2.5 students, and we're still at the very bottom of the state. So obviously there are people that are not carrying their weight. And so through attrition, through layoffs, and then attrition further on after the layoffs, we run a pretty tight ship now. We have about 30 employees. So we've moved up a little bit. However, some of those are kind of, I would say, seasonal type employees. But we were able to not only pay off the debt that we had accrued, but we're on a much firmer foundation now, and we have about $3 million in reserve. So we've made tremendous gains, and that was through some assistance through the SIG grant. I don't know if there's other areas that maybe people have questions about, but we started from ground zero in this district. 2 years ago, when they released the rankings again, we had moved up 32 places in the state ranking, so we would no longer qualify as a SIG school.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan, for sharing that. And for those of you listening, I would direct you, if you have more questions about that, to type in chat. And also, I wanted to emphasize that the SOPAS staff evaluation focused on data-driven instruction in Montana is something to consider if you're thinking about how to ensure high-quality staff in rural areas. The process of reflection sounded really promising to me, and it seemed to work very well there. So that's another lesson learned that you could apply in the future under ESSA. So as Julie has encouraged you, type in chat with questions to Dan if you want to ask questions or with ideas to share that are related. I'm going to move now to our third panelist. This is Deb Pfost-Idaho, and Deb and I actually work together closely on another project with REL Northwest, looking at the capacity builders. And Deb, it looks like her phone might be muted right now. I'm hoping that that will be unmuted. And she will tell you about her experiences in Idaho. And it looks like she's unmuted now. So Deb, go ahead.
So in Idaho, we call our system of support Idaho Building Capacity, and we hire retired educators that work as capacity builders. Idaho is geographically large, but has a small population. And so the Idaho State Department of Education works in partnership with 3 of the state universities. In northern Idaho, the Panhandle part of Idaho, we work with the University of Idaho. Down in the southwest corner is really the population center of the state, and we work with Boise State University. And then throughout southeast Idaho, we actually have 2 offices, 2 IBC offices that serve out of the Idaho State University. So it kind of creates 4 IBC regions. We serve about 20 to 25 schools in each region and about 10 districts in each region. Participation is voluntary. Some of our priority and focus schools participate and some choose not to. Originally, we could serve the Title I schools that were not making AYP. Now, those schools that miss targets on our state assessment are eligible. And we're actually able to serve some non-Title I schools because we have some state funds that we can use to support them. So any school that misses targets is eligible. We have to kind of look at how many targets they miss and prioritize which schools we have funding to serve. When a capacity builder is assigned to a school, we usually have a district capacity builder that serves with them and is assigned to the district office. And that helps us to build that sustainability and that support from the district office. Originally, we started with scaffolded support, about 30 hours a month, and then over 3 years, reducing down to 15 to 10 hours a month. It's kind of averaged out more now at about 20 hours a month. Our capacity builders had a hard time using 30 hours that first year as they were building relationships and trust. And then by the end of the year, they were starting to, ask for more time in the schools as those projects that they were working on were really moving forward. One of our schools that participates in IBC and has a SIG school is Fort Hall Elementary School. It's in the Blackfoot School District. It's a K-5 school, and it's located on the Shoshone-Bannock Reservation. They were one of our original SIG schools, and they continue to be a priority school. 98% of the students are Native American, with about 92% eligible for free and reduced lunch. They've participated in IBC for 3.5 years, with capacity builder assigned both at the school and at the district office. There are also other schools in the Blackfoot district that participate in IBC as well. The district's been very supportive and very interested in the project. Initially, that district saw SIG money, and it probably sounds familiar to many of you, as a way to free up money for other projects. Over time, there was a sense of urgency that grew in how do we support this school. The school was using a strong core reading program, so they decided initially to invest in intervention materials and in an instructional coach. Their scores still didn't improve as much as they wanted to, so a courageous district staff really took on replacing teachers, and they recruited their best teachers in the district and then paid them bonuses in order to serve at that school. The school before had been kind of one of those gateway schools that was your foot in the door. You got a job at Fort Hall Elementary and then transferred quickly, so there was kind of a revolving door of teachers. This has helped to kind of stabilize the staff as well as be sure that they're bringing in some of their great teachers. One of the things they started to look at, because they just weren't seeing the change that they wanted to, was they started to look at that reading program and say, this is working in other schools, but it's not working here. And we know that these teachers know how to teach it and have had success in other places with it. So they gave it half a year, and when they weren't seeing the results that they wanted, they went ahead and changed programs to an even more structured, more explicit reading program. And by the end of the year, one of the kindergarten reported that they had about 80% of their kids at proficient on the state reading test. And so that was, for their kindergarten, that was an amazing growth. When I talked to the principal this morning, she said that she was kind of laughing because her teachers are kind of complaining because they have so many more kids proficient than they've ever had before that in order to meet their growth goals is going to be harder. But, and that's just really a good problem to have. They also work alongside the leadership team. Our capacity builder is a retired principal, and she lives in a nearby community, and she has lots of resources and able to connect that school with some of the resources in other communities around in the area. She's also been able to support the principal as the principal was a new principal and was able to help her figure out how to deal with some of the difficult situations that arrive. She works along with the leadership team and makes decisions to improve the school. And then she's helping the teachers and the students to really celebrate some of the successes they see. And they're just really headed in a great direction. And I'll go ahead and I don't know if Catlin, you want to continue from here or if there's any questions?
Yeah, thanks so much, Deb. And I did see a couple questions for you in chat and also one for Dan that I'm going to circle Dan back to you after, Deb. So, Deb, people wanted to know, first of all, what the reading programs were. You said that the school started with one and then switched.
So they started with Open Court and they switched to Reading Mastery.
Okay, great, thanks. And then one other question for you, Deb, before I move to Dan. Deb, someone asked how they recruited the new staff. It sounds like there were some bonuses, but was that the main thing, or were there other recruitment elements?
So they went personally to those teachers that they knew were outstanding teachers in their other schools and asked them to come. And I think there was some honor in that, in saying that we know that you're a really good teacher and we need you there. And then there were the bonuses. They used their SIG money for bonuses for those teachers.
And then, Deb, just to build on that question, I think is really, having worked in schools where staff come and turn around and leave, how did you get teachers to stay there? I mean, for sustaining that growth, what are you seeing in that sense?
To stay at the school?
Yes, to have them stay at the school. And that's a question Kimberly said. How did you get them and how did you retain them?
So it's only been, I think this is their third year. So I think the teachers were pretty committed to those 3 years, and I don't know exactly what the plan is next.
Yeah, that would be, Catlin, that would be a nice research study there.
Yes, I would love to do that. If anyone has the desire to do it with me, let me know. We can work on some funding. I wanted to go back to Dan, too. There was a similar question about recruiting teachers and also getting them to buy into the staff evaluation. Dan, could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, yeah, the recruiting, what we ended up having to do is raise our base pay. And so even though we were in a negotiating year, I unilaterally took off the bottom 3 years of the matrix. We got no concessions from the union for that. And then just this current year, the next negotiations, we took off another 2 years. So our base pay now is $31,000, which isn't probably anywhere close to some of the other states, but for Montana, it's not unreasonable for a rural school. So we're actually middle of the pack there for Class C with our recruitment, and we're only about 30 miles from Billings, so that helps. Billings is the biggest city in the state here in Montana. The buy-in from the staff for the evaluation was very difficult. In fact, we used the model to hire an outside evaluator just so that we could keep personalities out of it, because many of the teachers had been here for over 10 years. I would say over half the teachers had been here for more than 10 years. And so, if you've gone 10 years without any evaluation, then all of a sudden you do have one, you're not going to be too happy about it. And so we had this outside person come in, and that person would work with the principal and myself, and so the three of us would actually evaluate all of the teachers. And we tried to make sure that it was a positive experience for them. We had the teachers, the initial part of the SOPAS evaluation was to interview them and say, you know, what their lesson is going to be. They get to choose their lesson, and what should we look for as evaluators and that type of stuff. So really get them involved in the evaluation itself. And that helped. There was some, you know, obviously there are resistance to change, but I would say at that point we were down to probably only about 2 teachers that did not like the SOPAS evaluation.
Great. Thanks so much.
Sure.
It's really been wonderful to hear the panelists share, and I very much appreciate that, and also to have the information going out in chat and everyone's questions. I was thrilled to do the quantitative portion of this research project with a survey, but bringing it to life with stories from the field is really important if we're going to use these lessons to help rural schools under ESSA. So Julie, I will turn it back to you as we are almost out of time.
Yeah, thank you, Catlin. Thank you, our wonderful panelists, for giving your perspectives, and thank you for our participants for taking time out of your schedule. So just to finally wrap up, we want you to think about what one of your takeaways is today as you think about what will struggling schools need under ESSA. Really appreciate your final reflections, if you can type those in the chat. We also gave you a survey because we know sometimes you have to jump out onto another meeting, another classroom, and get back into the real work, the hard work that this all entails in school improvement and turnaround. So for contact information, we will be posting all of this on the Center for School Turnaround, as well as the School Turnaround Learning Community. So it is more public available, so you can share it with those that you work. Again, we really ask you to think and send in one sort of final thought or reflection, and I might ask that. I don't want to put our presenters and panelists on the spot, but I might circle back and ask them to answer that question and think about wrapping it up with one final reflection from them. And Patrice writes, struggling districts and schools will need assistance with focusing and being strategic in decision making. Thank you for sharing that aha with us, Patricia. So surveys, we'll send that out. The archive and related resources will be related and posted on the School Turnaround site, webinar site. And as we wrap up and you post your final thoughts, I will ask our panelists, and starting maybe with you, Catlin, just one big aha about what this has surfaced for you in the work that you do as a researcher about next research in helping this question too.
Great. Well, I love Patricia's comment that struggling districts and schools will need assistance with focus and being strategic in decision making. That was one of my big points for this. Rural schools are going to need technical assistance. And my big aha is that there are many lessons out there. The panelists really showed me that. There are a number of things I'm interested in looking into next. Let's just go in alphabetical order. Brad, one last big aha from you.
Yeah, I'm just talking or hearing from the other folks, just the continuous nature of this work that you know, even listening to Dan and getting, you know, and building the urgency with stakeholders, that's an ongoing process, that you're building relationships, you know, getting folks to stay, the staff, or to move on if needed. Just that ongoing, it's not a one-off type of thing that we're doing here.
Great, thanks so much. And what about you, Deb? You're next on our slide. One last thought from you.
I kind of agree with Brad that the process of turning around schools is not a quick fix, and really to be able to take it step by step and use that data and say, did this piece work, and then what can we add to it, and just keep moving forward.
Great. I like the idea of keeping moving forward. Wonderful. And Dan, on to you. One last thought.
I guess for us, you know, collaboration is what's important not only within the school but within the other 6 schools. You know, in Montana there was only 3 districts spread throughout the state, but we would get together at least twice a year and share experiences because, you know, they may be able to solve attendance issues and we may be able to solve, curriculum issues, and maintaining some sort of collaboration, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a ton of information out there, and use your colleagues, use the state, use the experts.
Well, thank you, everyone. Really, Catlin, over to you.
Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate it, and I'll leave it to Julie to give our last word if needed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Catlin. And you appreciate this last word because you're the evaluation. We have a survey up there, so we'd love to get your feedback on how we can continue to share these conversations around research to practice. And I really do think that putting voices and having different perspectives on the continuous complexity, and that it does take it does take a village to work together, from the organic piece as well as the structures and pieces that go in place at states and districts to help support, and school sites to help this work. So thank you, everyone. We'll wrap it up. We invite you to come back to the School Turnaround Learning Community site. Keep adding your comments, look at related resources, and thank you again to our wonderful presenters and panelists. Really appreciated you giving your stories, and continue up the great work. We had a question here from Wendy. Just want to ask you panelists, she said, will any of the panelists be at the Battlefields online events for education? She posted in there, so you might want to circle back. Thank you, everyone. Keep up the fantastic work. And as a person who grew up and benefited from great teachers in rural schools and community voices, I invite you to continue your great work there. Take care, and thanks, everybody. We're officially ending today's webinar, and we'll be posting everything out in reminders. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.